All right, welcome to today, where we are going to be installing the exhaust. This is Sawicki Speed mid-length 2-into-1 for the M8 Softail. That comes with the actual pipe itself, and then two of the down pipes that connect from the cylinder heads, and then all of the hardware as well. Now, I had also gone ahead and ordered some of this baffle packing material just in case. This is just for the future, for when the packing material inside that does eventually wear out. I can just already have it on hand to replace it. So, tools that we're going to need for today: we're going to need torque wrench, we're going to need a hook and pick set to pull out the old exhaust gaskets, some anti-seize to go on the O2 sensors when I install them in the down tubes. Then we're also going to need some Loctite and a variety of wrenches as well as Torx bits in order to pull the rear passenger peg off, as well as this cover that's on here, and access the 4 bolts holding the exhaust into the motorcycle itself. So, preliminarily speaking, from what I understand as far as how to remove all of this stuff, these bolts will have to come out up here and down here, both for the slip-on portions as well as for the cover. And then there's also a few more bolts down in here that are going to have to come out. But I'll show you guys all that as I work on the bike and take things apart. So, without further ado, let's get started. All right, so step one for removing your old exhaust is to disconnect your O2 sensors. So specifically for the Fat Bob, the rear O2 sensor is connected right back here, and then the line follows right up here underneath this cover. That's just a quick connect right there that you just got to unplug. Then for the front, the O2 sensor connects right here, and then it runs down here. Let's see if I can show you. It runs down here to the bottom of the bike. So fairly straightforward and easy to access, which is really nice. Okay. All right, so for me, I don't know why, but for some reason I was really struggling with these O2 sensors. But long story short, right here, zoom in just a little so you can see, right here's a little tab that you just depress and it pops right out. All right, so now that your O2 sensor is disconnected, next step is to remove the heat shield. So on the Fat Bob specifically, you have a hose clamp or back here, another one right here, then back here. Then for the front pipes, you have 2 hose clamps, one on either side of the O2 sensor, then one down here, right there. Then you got 6 bolts that you need to remove in order to pull the heat shield itself off. So I'll do that. All right, so the size that you're going to need to pull these bolts out is a size T27. I know this is kind of a little bit of a overkill on the length for what you'll need, but it just came in a set that I need in order to remove the rear peg, because the bolt to access it is way back there. And unfortunately, I didn't have anything in my tool inventory that could reach it, so I ended up buying a whole set, and T27 came with it. But that's what size these are. Then once I find out the size for these, I will let you know. All right, so finally found the right size wrench, or socket I should say, for these exhaust brackets. There's 2 ways you can go about taking these off. You can either use a flathead screwdriver, which I personally hate flatheads, or you can use a size 8mm socket, and this works great. Like I mentioned earlier, just go through, pop off all of these hose clamps, and the rest of your covers will be able to just come right off. I'll see you when I got those off. All right, so now that you got your heat shields taken off of your bike, next step is to remove the 2 bolts securing the slip-on portions of your exhaust in place. This I found is a 14mm socket. deep well is going to be your friend here. Also, another thing that I need to mention, if you look back in here, there's a bracket holding these in place that's held in place with 2 Allen wrenches. I'll post on the screen exactly what size those Allen bolts are, but those are going to have to be taken off for the top as well as the bottom. Thankfully, the bottom's easy to access. The top, you just need little raccoon fingers. All right, so a little bit of a tip. This bolt that's back here is a royal pain to try and get into. Normal Allen wrenches are too long, and the angle is weird, and Google suggests taking off the back wheel, which quite frankly isn't realistic. So what I ended up doing is I actually took my hex socket, which is a 3/16 by the way, connected it to a swivel head, and then a long extension. I think this is a 6-inch extension. And for me, this worked great. I was able to break it, I was able to get it loose, and get this nut or bolt back there out. So now that those bolts are out, this should just theoretically slide right off, but I need both hands to get it to slide off because I'm not that dexterous. So once I get this off, I'll get this bottom one off, which should be a lot easier because both of the bolts are right here, easy access, just got to lay on the ground. Pull both of those off, and then from there we can loosen up the header bolts that connect into the cylinders on the back and the front. Then this whole assembly should just come right off. All right, so to get at this front bolt, it's kind of a little bit of a pain in the butt. So what I ended up doing is I took off the front radiator cover, which is just one T25 bolt or T27 bolt. I made T25 work down here. Then another bolt up here, also the same size as used down here. Then this assembly just lifts up and you can lean it forward. Then I used a deep well 13mm socket attached to my swivel joint with an extension, and that worked out for me. Hopefully I can have enough clearance in there later to be able to torque it down correctly. But that's how I made that work. So now that I have all those bolts off, everything is loose, this entire assembly should just slide right off. All right, so once you got your exhaust pulled off the bike, to pull it off, you literally just slide it off. It's very straightforward. But once you got it off, next step is to pull off the O2 sensors, because these are going to get reused. I found 17mm crow's foot to work great for that. I'm not sure if orientation matters on these, but because I pulled the rear one off first, this one is going to go back on the rear pipe when I put it in, and the front one is going to go back in the front. But once you got the O2 sensors off, next step is going to be to pull off a couple little C-clips attaching, holding these flanges in place, because we're going to be reusing these flanges. Also, item of note, save these nuts, because these nuts are going to be going back on the studs right there. Then once the clips are taken off of the exhaust flanges, next step is going to be to pull off the old exhaust gaskets from inside the holes, because the Sawicki Speed exhaust gaskets are specifically designed to work with their exhaust system. With that being said, I'll finish getting these O2 sensors out, get this area cleaned up, then show you what's next on the Sawicki Speed exhaust itself. All right, so once you have your O2 sensors taken off of your old exhaust, as well as your manifold flange and the C-clips pulled off of the old exhaust, next up, what you're going to want to do for this specific system, Sawicki Speed, they actually include 18mm, 12mm reducers, so you can reuse your stock O2 sensors, or if you don't want to use the stock O2 sensors because you have 18mm widebands, their system already comes pre-built to accept the 18mm. Now, I didn't buy the 18mm because, quite frankly, I didn't have the budget for it. So I'm going to be using these adapters to reuse my sensors. Now, one thing to keep in mind with this, when you do go to install everything, a little bit of anti-seize goes a long way. This will prevent it from sticking up, so you can pull the O2 sensors out down the road if you need to without destroying the sensors in the pipes, and also possibly without destroying the pipes when you go to pull them out. So that being said, I'll get all this installed and put together on the downpipes. Then I'll pull out the old exhaust gaskets. I haven't done that yet. I'll pull out the old exhaust gaskets, get the new ones put in, which, like I said, these ones are a flat style, designed specifically for the Sawicki Speed manifold. That being said, I'll see you when it's time to install the new pipes. All right, so once you got your O2 sensors and your circ clips for your exhaust installed on the new system, next up is to remove your passenger foot peg. Now, couple items of note. Number one, this is a T45 bit. That's I think the bolt head goes to right about here, more or less, is where it starts. I highly recommend getting yourself one of these long shank T45 bits. Then second thing, when you're taking these back foot peg off, be careful. This little roller bearing is under spring tension right here on the back of the foot peg. Just close in so you can see. That's under spring tension, and it will fall out or fly out, and you will lose it if you're not careful. So that's that. And once you got your foot peg bracket off, there's 2 additional bolts right here and here that you got to take off, and that is just a 5/16 inch hex. So once you get those off, then we'll move on to the next step. All right, so now that you got your exhaust gaskets, let's see if I can zoom in and show you. Now that you got your exhaust gaskets put into the manifold right there, and now that you got your rear bracket put on, as well as your rear foot peg reinstalled, next step is to take your exhaust, your pipe. The instructions recommend taking your front one first, and you're just going to feed it up in there and gently, not snug it down, but just kind of set it up in there. Keep everything nice and loose so you can adjust the tightness later after everything is dry fit and put together. Once everything is dry assembled, then what you're going to do is just going to go ahead, torque everything down, tighten everything up, and that should be that. And then clean up, start it, and go about your day. So I'll see you when it comes time for putting the next parts on. Well, that was a lot more difficult than I initially gave it credit for. So the merge collector on these guys is very tight, which means just precise machining. So excellent work on Sawicki Speed. That just means that it's a royal pain to try and get this installed correctly. So like I mentioned before, in order to get this installed correctly, you have to leave everything loose on the entire system, from the mounting bracket attached to the frame to your little dog bone back here and your bolts to your exhaust flange bolts up here in your heads. Everything has to stay loose until this merge collector is on and as far in as you can get it, at which point you start tightening everything from the front to the back. And these exhaust flange bolts, according to what I was able to find for those torque specs, those are 60 to 80 inch-pounds, front and rear. These exhaust springs, strongly recommend getting yourself a puller. I just used a dental pick, and that happened to torque pretty well. Those are pretty tight. So one thing to be aware with that, those are stiff spring. Then back here, instructions don't come with a specific torque spec for these, and quite frankly, I'm not able to get my torque wrench back here anyway, so I just tighten these up hand tight. Now, one item of note, the dog bone that comes with this, it slides back in here with the flat portion up against the groove, the inside groove, if you can see that. That's how the dog bone sits in there. But overall, I'm happy with the way this looks and turned out. Next up, I'm going to install the tuner, but that's going to be a separate video. For now, thank you for watching my exhaust install, and I hope to see you guys down the road.